Hello, my dear lore seekers. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories. Tonight, we shall not speak of grand castles or heroic founders, but of a shadow that lies far deeper within the heart of magic itself. It is a darkness, born not of monstrous creatures or ancient evils, but from the will of the witch or wizard who dares to wield it. Settle in, quiet your mind, and let us journey into the most forbidden corners of magical law and lore as we uncover the complete, unabridged history of the 3 spells so vile, so absolute in their malice, that they were branded with a single, damning word: unforgivable. Before we begin, if you find value in our stories, please take a moment to like and subscribe, or check out our Patreon link in the description below. Your support is what allows us to continue these journeys together. We appreciate it more than you know. And now, let's begin. In the vast and intricate world of magic, there exists a hierarchy of harm, a grammar of malice that defines the very nature of conflict. Spells are not created equal. Their purpose, their effect, and most importantly, the intent required to cast them, separate the mischievous from the malevolent, the harmful from the horrific. To truly understand the unforgivable curses, we must first understand the language of the dark arts itself, a lexicon built upon escalating degrees of cruelty. At the lowest rung of this ladder, we find the jinx. These are spells of minor dark magic, often causing more irritation and embarrassment than genuine harm. Think of the Bat Bogey Hex, a favorite of Ginny Weasley, which grotesquely enlarges an opponent's bogies, gives them wings, and sends them attacking the victim's face. Or consider the Opugno Jinx, which Hermione Granger used in a moment of jealous fury to send a flock of conjured canaries to peck at Ron Weasley. While unpleasant, jinxes are generally seen as the stuff of schoolyard squabbles and temporary discomfort. They are the magical equivalent of a shove or a sharp-tongued insult, fleeting in their effect and lacking in profound malice. A step above this, we find the hex. Hexes carry a more potent strain of dark magic. They are less about simple annoyance and more about genuine, if often temporary, affliction. A hex might alter a person's physical state in a deeply unpleasant way, such as the knee reversal hex, which does precisely what its name implies. These spells are more serious than jinxes, crossing a line from prankishness into deliberate harm. They are a clear escalation, indicating a desire to cause distress and disadvantage to an opponent. Yet, even they exist in a space where recovery is expected and permanent damage is not the primary goal. And then, at the apex of this dark triad, we find the curse. Curses are the most severe and dangerous category of offensive magic. Their sole purpose is to inflict significant, often lasting, harm. This is the domain of spells designed to control, to torture, and to kill. Within this category lie spells of profound darkness, like the flesh-eating curse that left Bill Weasley permanently scarred, or the curse that withered Albus Dumbledore's hand. And at the very pinnacle of this category, considered the most potent and sinister expressions of dark magic known to the wizarding world, are the 3 unforgivable curses. But what truly separates a simple jinx from a world-shattering curse? What is the fundamental ingredient that elevates a spell into the realm of the dark arts? The answer, as Severus Snape once noted, is that the dark arts are many, varied, ever-changing, and eternal. They are not a fixed list of spells, but a philosophy of magic rooted in a single vital component: intent. Any spell can be used with harmful intent. A simple levitation charm could be used to drop a heavy object on someone's head. A severing charm could be used to inflict a wound. But the dark arts are those spells and practices created with the primary, and often sole, purpose of causing harm. This intention to harm has a profound and corrosive effect not just on the victim, but on the caster. In the world of Harry Potter, the soul is not a mere metaphor or a philosophical concept. It is a tangible, though immaterial, part of a being. It is the essence of a person, which can live on after the death of the body. And like any part of a being, it can be damaged. The use of dark magic, particularly acts of extreme evil, can corrupt and maim the soul. The ultimate act of evil, the act of murder, is so profound a violation of nature that it literally rips the soul apart. This is not a figure of speech. It is a metaphysical reality. It is this very tearing of the soul that is the key to creating a Horcrux, the darkest of all magical objects. The corruption of the soul manifests physically over time. Lord Voldemort is the most terrifying example of this principle. The man who was once the handsome and charismatic Tom Riddle became a monstrous serpentine creature, his humanity stripped away with each act of murder, each splitting of his soul. His red eyes, slit-like nostrils, and waxy, skull-like face were the outward signs of an inner reality, a soul so mutilated and defiled that it had warped his very being. This is the ultimate price of the dark arts. They are a path of self-destruction, a slow suicide of the spirit that leaves the practitioner a hollowed-out shell of their former self, a monster in human form. It is within this framework of intent and spiritual corruption that we can finally understand what makes the 3 unforgivable curses so unique. The wizarding world is filled with dangerous magic. The curse Sectum Sempra, invented by Severus Snape, can slash an opponent with invisible swords, causing them to bleed to death if not treated immediately. Find Fear is a cursed, sentient fire that seeks out living targets and is capable of destroying even Horcruxes, but it is nearly impossible to control and can easily consume its own caster. So why are these and countless other lethal spells not classified as unforgivable? The answer lies in the unique magical and legal distinction of the Unforgivables. As the disguised Barty Crouch Jr., posing as Alastor Moody, explained, and as Bellatrix Lestrange later taunted Harry in the Department of Mysteries to cast an unforgivable curse, you have to truly mean it. You cannot cast the Cruciatus Curse with mere righteous anger. You must possess a genuine, sadistic desire to cause pain, to revel in the suffering of your victim. You cannot cast the Imperious Curse without a powerful, overriding will to dominate and subjugate another being, to erase their free will and make them an extension of your own. And most critically, you cannot cast the Killing Curse, Avada Kedavra, without a pure, unadulterated intent to kill. The spell requires a torrent of malicious force, a complete and total commitment to the act of murder. This requirement of absolute intent is what sets these three curses apart. One could, conceivably, kill someone by accident with a blasting curse or a severing charm. The spell itself does not require a murderous heart to function, but one cannot accidentally cast an unforgivable. The magic simply will not work. The spell itself is a perfect reflection of the caster's soul at the moment of its use. This unique property provides a chilling insight into the wizarding legal system. We see throughout the stories that wizarding justice can be arbitrary and deeply flawed. Sirius Black was sent to the wizarding prison, Azkaban, for 12 years without a trial. Cornelius Fudge acted as both prosecutor and judge in Harry's underage magic hearing. Proving a suspect's state of mind, their criminal intent, is a challenge for any legal system. The Unforgivable Curses, however, solve this problem with brutal efficiency. The successful casting of one of these spells is, in itself, an irrefutable confession. It is proof positive of both the criminal act and the criminal intent, all wrapped into one. There can be no defense of accident, no plea of recklessness. The magic itself testifies to the caster's malice. When the Ministry of Magic officially classified these curses as unforgivable in 1717, they were not just making a moral statement. They were forging a powerful legal weapon, creating a category of crime where guilt was absolute and prosecution could be swift and final. In a world of magical complexity and legal ambiguity, the Unforgivables offered a terrifying but undeniable clarity. The Unforgivable Curses did not spring into existence in 1717 with the stroke of a ministry quill. Their roots run far deeper back into the shadows of the early Middle Ages. This was a tumultuous era for the wizarding world, long before the establishment of a centralized Ministry of Magic, and long before the International Statute of Secrecy drove wizards into hiding. Magic was a wilder, more dangerous force, and its practitioners were often isolated, living under the constant threat of persecution from their non-magical neighbors. During this period, magical knowledge was not standardized. It was passed down through families or taught in secret by local practitioners, and the dark arts, as Severus Snape described them, were many, varied, ever-changing, and eternal. They were not a codified set of forbidden spells, but a vast and mutating field of magical practice. This was an age of experimentation, where powerful and amoral wizards pushed the boundaries of what was possible, often with horrific results. It is in this crucible of fear, persecution and unchecked magical exploration that the Unforgivable Curses were likely born. They were created by dark witches and wizards as ultimate tools of power. The power to control, the power to torture, and the power to kill. While we do not know the names of their inventors, we can look to figures like Herpo the Foul as exemplars of the mindset that would produce such magic. Herpo the Foul was an ancient Greek dark wizard, one of the earliest known parcel mouths, and infamous for being the first to successfully create a basilisk, and, even more horrifyingly, the first to create a Horcrux. His legacy is one of profound disregard for the laws of nature, a willingness to twist life and soul to serve his own ends. While there is no direct canonical link between Herpo and the Unforgivables, he represents the spirit of dark innovation that defined this era. The curses were likely developed not as single, brilliant inventions, but as the culmination of centuries of dark magical research, refined and perfected by those who sought absolute dominion over others. They are the foulest fruits of a dark and dangerous age. The very words used to invoke these curses are steeped in ancient power, their etymology revealing the stark and singular purpose for which they were created. Each incantation is a key, unlocking a specific chamber of malice within the caster's soul. Let us begin with the Curse of Control, Imperio. The incantation is a corruption of the Latin word impero, which means I command, or the related word imperiosus, meaning commanding, mighty, powerful. These are the root words from which Muggles derive terms like imperial, emperor, and imperative. The name itself is a declaration of absolute authority, a magical assertion of dominance. It speaks to the curse's function of subjugating the will of another, of turning a person into a puppet, a mere extension of the caster's desires. The etymology ties this act of magical enslavement to the most absolute forms of power known in the non-magical world, framing it as an act of ultimate tyranny. Next, we turn to the Curse of Pain, Crucio. This incantation is drawn directly from the Latin verb crucio, which translates simply and brutally to I torture. This word, in turn, is derived from crux, the Latin word for cross. It is the root of English words like excruciating and, most chillingly, crucifixion, a method of execution infamous for the prolonged and agonizing suffering it inflicted. The etymology of crucio leaves no room for ambiguity. It is not a curse of discomfort or pain as a byproduct. Its entire essence, its very name, is the act of torture itself. It is a spell designed for one purpose: to inflict the maximum possible agony upon a living being. Finally, we arrive at the most infamous spell in the wizarding world, the killing curse, Avada Kedavra. In an interview, J.K. Rowling explained that she derived this incantation from an ancient Aramaic phrase, Avda Kedavra, which means, let the thing be destroyed. She revealed that this was the original source of the common stage magician's phrase, abracadabra. In its original context, this Aramaic phrase was used as a healing charm, with the thing to be destroyed being an illness or a malevolent spirit. Rowling, in a stroke of dark genius, twisted this benevolent meaning. In her world, the thing to be destroyed is the person standing before the caster. The incantation is also hauntingly similar to the English word cadaver, which means a corpse, a phonetic echo that reinforces the spell's deadly finality. Thus, a phrase once used to preserve life was repurposed into the ultimate instrument of death, a linguistic corruption that mirrors the magical corruption required to cast it. These three incantations, Imperio, Crucio, Avada Kedavra, are more than just magical trigger words. They are declarations of intent, ancient syllables that give voice to the darkest impulses of the human soul, the will to dominate, the will to torture, and the will to destroy. Now, let us embark on a deeper exploration of each of these three terrible curses to understand their mechanics, their history, and the devastating impact they have had on the wizarding world. We will examine them as a triptych of evil, three distinct panels that together form a complete picture of unforgivable malice. We begin with the Imperious Curse, the theft of the will. When a witch or wizard is struck by the Imperio incantation, they are not subjected to pain or immediate harm. Instead, they experience a sensation described as a wonderful release, a blissful and dreamlike trance. All thoughts, worries, and responsibilities are gently wiped away, leaving behind a vague, untraceable happiness. This pleasant, euphoric state is precisely what makes the curse so insidious and difficult to resist. The victim is lulled into a state of serene compliance, their own will entirely supplanted by that of the caster. They become a puppet, capable of performing any act, from the mundane to the monstrous, without any sense of personal agency or moral conflict. They will follow any command given, even if it means harming themselves or those they love. Resisting the Imperious Curse is an act of immense mental fortitude. It requires an exceptional strength of will, the ability to recognize the foreign voice in one's mind and actively fight against its commands. The wizarding world knows of only a few individuals who have demonstrated this remarkable ability. Barty Crouch Sr. managed to fight off Voldemort's Imperious Curse, though the effort left him mentally scarred and prone to confusion. His son, Barty Crouch Jr., also learned to resist the curse after being held under his father's control for over a decade, a feat that allowed him to eventually break free and rejoin his master. But the most notable example of resistance is, of course, Harry Potter. His first encounter with the curse came during his 4th year, in a deeply unethical defense against the dark arts lesson taught by the disguised Barty Crouch Jr. Posing as Alastor Moody, Crouch placed each student under the Imperious Curse to, as he claimed, teach them how to resist it. When it was Harry's turn, he felt the blissful emptiness wash over him, followed by a faint, distant voice telling him to jump onto the desk. A part of Harry's mind, however, questioned the command. But why? He thought. This flicker of defiance was the key. As Crouch intensified the curse, Harry fought back, simultaneously trying to jump and trying to stay put, resulting in him crashing into the desk. Crouch, impressed, and perhaps seeking to test the limits of the boy destined to face Voldemort, subjected Harry to the curse 4 more times in that single lesson, until Harry could throw it off completely. This innate resistance would prove vital later in the graveyard of Little Hangleton, when Voldemort himself tried to force Harry to bow before him using the Imperious Curse. Harry, drawing on his training and his indomitable will, was able to defy the Dark Lord's command directly. The history of the Imperious Curse is a dark thread woven through the tapestry of modern wizarding conflict. During the First Wizarding War in the 1970s and early 80s, its use by Death Eaters was rampant. They used it to infiltrate the Ministry of Magic, to force innocents to commit atrocities, and to swell their own ranks with unwilling servants. The curse's true power as a weapon of social and political warfare became terrifyingly clear in the war's aftermath. When Voldemort fell, many captured Death Eaters, including prominent figures like Lucius Malfoy, claimed that they had only served the Dark Lord because they were under the influence of the Imperious Curse. This created a crisis of trust that paralyzed the Ministry. It was nearly impossible to distinguish the true victims from the cunning liars, allowing many guilty individuals to escape justice and reintegrate into society, their dark allegiances hidden, waiting for their master's return. The curse's capacity for long-term control is one of its most horrifying aspects. After Barty Crouch Sr. secretly rescued his son from Azkaban, he kept him imprisoned in his own home, controlled day and night by the Imperious Curse for over 10 years, a constant magical subjugation that slowly drove the younger Crouch to the brink of insanity before he finally managed to break free. During the Second Wizarding War, the curse was once again a key tool of the Death Eaters. Draco Malfoy, tasked with assassinating Dumbledore, placed Madame Rosmerta, the landlady of the 3 Broomsticks, under the Imperious Curse for months. He used her as an unwitting agent, forcing her to pass along a cursed necklace to Katie Bell and to poison a bottle of mead intended for the headmaster. The curse's most devastating political use came when the Death Eater Yaxley successfully placed Pius Thickness, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, under the curse. With Thickness as their puppet, the Death Eaters were able to orchestrate the fall of the Ministry of Magic from within, assassinating Minister Rufus Scrimgeour and installing Thickness as a figurehead minister, giving Voldemort total control of the wizarding government. Even the heroes of the story were forced to resort to this dark magic in their most desperate hour. During the daring heist on Gringotts Bank to retrieve Helga Hufflepuff's cup, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, Harry Potter cast the Imperious Curse for the first time in his life. He used it on Bogrod, an elderly goblin, and on the Death Eater Travers, to force their compliance and gain access to the Lestrange Vault. Later, in the heat of the Battle of Hogwarts, Professor Minerva McGonagall, a fundamentally good and righteous witch, used the Imperious Curse on the Death Eater Amicus Carrow, commanding him to lie down in his sister's place to protect the students of Ravenclaw Tower. These instances highlight the true, insidious nature of the Imperious Curse. While Avada Kedavra ends a life, and Crucio destroys a mind with pain, Imperio attacks the very foundation of a civilized society, trust. It turns neighbors into spies, officials into traitors, and friends into unwilling assassins. It creates a world of paranoia where no one can be certain of anyone else's loyalties. The physical damage of the other curses is horrifying, but the social and psychological damage wrought by the Imperious Curse, its ability to rot a community from the inside out, arguably makes it the most dangerous and truly unforgivable weapon in the dark arts arsenal. From the silent theft of will, we now turn to the screaming agony of the flesh. The second unforgivable curse, the Cruciatu Curse, is the pure distilled essence of torture. Its incantation, Crucio, is a declaration of its sole, horrific purpose. Unlike the killing curse's flash of green light, the Cruciatus Curse is invisible. No jet of light shoots from the caster's wand. There is only the incantation and then the pain. The sensation inflicted by the curse is described by its victims as unimaginable, an all-consuming agony that obliterates all other thought and sensation. When Voldemort used it on Harry in the graveyard, Harry described it as feeling as though his very bones were on fire, his head splitting open along his scar. A later use felt like 1,000 white-hot knives boring into every inch of his skin. The pain is so absolute that it can overwhelm the strongest of wills, reducing the victim to a writhing, screaming wreck, begging for unconsciousness or even death as a release. Crucially, the curse does not cause any physical injury. It is believed to work by magically stimulating all of the pain receptors in the victim's body simultaneously. It is pure, unadulterated torment, inflicted for its own sake. And this is key to understanding the magic behind it. To successfully cast the Cruciatus Curse, the caster must possess a deep, sadistic desire to cause pain. They must, as Bellatrix Lestrange explained, enjoy it. Righteous anger, fury, or a desire for retribution are not enough to fuel the curse to its full potential. When Harry, consumed with grief and rage after witnessing Bellatrix murder his godfather, Sirius Black, cast the curse at her, it only managed to knock her off her feet. His anger, however justified, lacked the core of pure sadism required. The curse demands a profound darkness in the caster's soul, a genuine pleasure in the suffering of another. While a brief exposure to the curse is agonizing, prolonged exposure is catastrophic. The intense, unending stimulation of the nervous system can cause irreversible damage to the victim's mind, effectively burning out their sanity. This is the tragic fate that befell Frank and Alice Longbottom, two respected Aurors and members of the original Order of the Phoenix. After Voldemort's first fall, they were captured by a group of 4 Death Eaters: Bellatrix Lestrange, her husband Rodolphus, his brother Rabastan, and Barty Crouch Jr. Seeking information on Voldemort's whereabouts, the Death Eaters subjected the Longbottoms to the Cruciatus Curse, torturing them until their minds shattered. They were left alive, but as empty shells, doomed to spend the rest of their days in the permanent ward of St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries, unable to recognize their own son, Neville. Their fate, as Alastair Moody grimly noted, was in some ways worse than death. The history of the Cruciatus Curse in the Wizarding Wars is a litany of cruelty. The earliest known use in the modern era was by a young Gellert Grindelwald, who used it on Aberforth Dumbledore during the fateful three-way duel that resulted in the death of their sister Ariana. During the First Wizarding War, it was a favored tool of the Death Eaters, used for interrogation and for sheer, terrifying sport. Lord Voldemort himself used it frequently, both on his enemies and on his own followers as a form of punishment. He used it on Harry in the Little Hangleton graveyard, and had previously used it on Death Eaters like Avery, and even Peter Pettigrew, to enforce his authority. During the Triwizard Tournament, Barty Crouch Jr., still disguised as Moody, placed Victor Crumb under the Imperious Curse, and forced him to cast the Cruciatus Curse on Cedric Diggory in the maze, a cruel act designed to clear Harry's path to the Triwizard Cup. In the Second Wizarding War, the curse's use became even more widespread. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, Bellatrix Lestrange, with fiendish delight, used the curse on Neville Longbottom, the son of the couple she had tortured into insanity years before. At Malfoy Manor, she used it to brutally interrogate Hermione Granger, her screams echoing through the house. When Voldemort took control of Hogwarts, the curse became a routine part of school life. The Carrow siblings, Alecto and Amicus, who were appointed as teachers, taught the dark arts and forced students to practice the Cruciatus Curse on their classmates who had earned detention. It was a perversion of education, turning the school into a training ground for cruelty. It was in this very environment that Harry Potter finally cast the curse with its full, devastating effect. After Amicus Carrow spat in the face of Professor McGonagall in the Ravenclaw common room, Harry, filled with a cold, protective fury, cast Crucio. The curse lifted the Death Eater off his feet, causing him to writhe and howl in the air before smashing him into a bookcase, unconscious. In that moment, Harry's rage was not the hot, grieving anger he felt for Bellatrix, but a deep, focused hatred for the man who had defiled his beloved teacher and terrorized his fellow students. It was a dark moment for the hero, a glimpse into the abyss of what it takes to wield such a terrible power. He would attempt it again, twice, against Snape in the aftermath of Dumbledore's death. But Snape, a master of the dark arts, easily blocked his attempts. The Cruciatus Curse stands as a monument to magical sadism, a spell whose only product is suffering, and whose successful use marks the caster as one who finds pleasure in the agony of others. And so we arrive at the final panel of our triptych, the curse that has defined an era and shaped the destiny of the wizarding world. More than any other, it is the end of all things, the final unanswerable word in any duel. It is the killing curse, Avada Kedavra. The mechanics of the curse are brutally simple. Upon the incantation, a jet of blinding green light erupts from the caster's wand. If this jet of light strikes a living target, it causes instant, painless death. There is no wound, no mark, no physical sign of violence left on the body, save for the victim's final expression, often one of shock or terror frozen on their face. This lack of any discernible cause of death has often perplexed Muggle authorities who have discovered its victims, as was the case with the Riddle family in 1942. The curse is believed to function by magically and instantaneously severing the soul from the body. It is not a poison, nor a physical blow. It is a direct assault on the connection between life and form. What makes Avada Kedavra so feared beyond its finality is its reputation as being unblockable. There is no known counter-curse. A standard shield charm, Protego, is utterly useless against it. The green light will pass through it as if it were not there. The only ways to survive the killing curse are to physically dodge the jet of light, or to intercept it with a solid, physical object. We see this during the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort in the Ministry of Magic, where Dumbledore animates the statues of the Fountain of Magical Brethren to physically block Voldemort's curses, which shatter the stone and marble upon impact. However, in the long and bloody history of this curse, there have been 3 legendary exceptions to its absolute power. 3 instances where the unblockable curse was, in fact, stopped. The first and most famous exception is the power of sacrificial protection, an ancient and profound magic fueled by love. On the 31st of October, 1981, when Lord Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow to murder the infant Harry Potter, he first killed James Potter. He then offered Lily Potter the chance to stand aside, a choice prompted by a request from Severus Snape. Lily refused, placing herself between Voldemort and her son, and begging for Harry's life. By willingly sacrificing her own life for her son's when she had the choice to live, she enacted a powerful, ancient charm. Her love became a magical shield. When Voldemort then turned his wand on Harry and cast Avada Kedavra, the curse could not kill him. It struck the magical protection Lily's sacrifice had created and rebounded upon the caster. Voldemort's soul was ripped from his body, and the curse left only a single mark on Harry, the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. Harry Potter became the only known person to have ever survived the killing curse. The second exception is a rare magical phenomenon known as priori incantatem, which occurs when 2 wands with cores from the same source, brother wands, are forced to do battle. This happened in the Little Hangleton graveyard, when Harry's wand, containing a feather from Dumbledore's phoenix fox, met Voldemort's wand, which contained the only other feather from that same phoenix. When their spells, Harry's Expelliarmus and Voldemort's Avada Kedavra, met in midair, the wands connected, and one forced the other to regurgitate the spells it had recently performed in reverse, creating ghostly echoes of Voldemort's recent victims, including Cedric Diggory and Harry's own parents. The third and final exception involves the unique and complex allegiances of the Elder Wand, one of the 3 Deathly Hallows. The Elder Wand will not willingly kill its true master. At the climax of the Battle of Hogwarts, Voldemort wielded the Elder Wand, believing himself to be its master after killing Severus Snape. However, the wand's true master was not Snape, but Draco Malfoy, who had disarmed Dumbledore atop the astronomy tower. And because Harry had, in turn, disarmed Draco at Malfoy Manor, Harry had become the Elder Wand's true master. When Voldemort cast the final Avada Kedavra at Harry, the wand recognized its master as the target and refused to act against him. The curse once again rebounded, striking Voldemort and killing him once and for all, as there were no more Horcruxes to tether his soul to the world. The Chronicle of the Killing Curse's use is a somber history of the wizarding world's greatest tragedies. Its story is inextricably linked with the rise and fall of its most prolific user, Lord Voldemort. His journey into darkness was paved with the victims of this spell. As a 16-year-old Tom Riddle, he used it to murder his Muggle father and grandparents, framing his Uncle Morphin Gaunt for the crime. Years later, he used it to murder Hepzibah Smith to steal the locket of Slytherin and the cup of Hufflepuff. During the First Wizarding War, the flash of green light became a symbol of the Death Eater's terror. And then came that fateful night in Godric's Hollow, with the murders of James and Lily Potter. The curse continued to mark Voldemort's return to power. Upon his full resurrection, his first act was to order Wormtail to murder the spare, Cedric Diggory, with his own wand. During his second reign of terror, the victims mounted. He murdered the Muggle studies teacher, Charity Burbage, for her perceived sympathy towards Muggles. He murdered the great dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald in his prison cell at Nurmengard while searching for the Elder Wand, and countless others fell to his wand during the Battle of Hogwarts. But Voldemort was not its only user. His followers wielded it with deadly effect. Bellatrix Lestrange used it to kill her own cousin, Sirius Black, knocking him through the ancient veiled archway in the Department of Mysteries. Even one of Harry's own classmates, Vincent Crabbe, attempted to use it twice in the Room of Requirement, his face contorted with a malice he could barely control, before he was consumed by his own fiend fire. And then there is the most complex and debated use of the curse in the entire series, the death of Albus Dumbledore. Severus Snape cast the killing curse at his longtime mentor atop the astronomy tower. But this was no simple act of betrayal. It was a pre-arranged mercy killing. Dumbledore, already dying from a curse on Marvolo Gaunt's ring and seeking to spare Draco Malfoy's soul from the act of murder, had commanded Snape to be the one to kill him when the time came. It was an act of profound loyalty, disguised as the ultimate betrayal, a use of the killing curse born not of hatred, but of a terrible, heartbreaking promise. The killing curse, therefore, is more than a spell. It is a force of history, a weapon that has toppled families, ended wars, and created legends. It is the final, absolute expression of the dark will to unmake life itself. The year 1717 stands as a pivotal moment in the legal history of the wizarding world. It was in this year that the Ministry of Magic, still a relatively young institution, formally classified the Imperius, Cruciatus, and Killing Curses as unforgivable, decreeing that the use of any one of them on a fellow human being would earn the caster a life sentence in Azkaban. To understand the gravity of this legislation, we must first understand the world in which it was passed, a world defined by fear, secrecy, and profound social upheaval. Just 25 years earlier, in 1692, the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy had been enacted. This was the culmination of centuries of escalating persecution of witches and wizards by Muggles, a period of witch hunts and burnings that reached a fever pitch with the infamous Salem witch trials in America. The statute was a radical act of societal self-preservation, forcing the entire wizarding world to retreat from the non-magical world, to erase its existence from Muggle history and live in hiding. This sudden and total segregation created a climate of intense paranoia and resentment. Many wizards felt angered and humiliated at being forced to scuttle like rats in the gutter. As Gellert Grindelwald would later describe it, this sentiment fueled a rise in anti-Muggle ideology. The early years of the British Ministry of Magic were dominated by this tension. The second Minister for Magic, Damocles Rowell, who took office in 1718, successfully campaigned on a platform of being tough on Muggles. His successor, Perseus Parkinson, even attempted to pass a law making it illegal for a witch or wizard to marry a Muggle. Internally, the wizarding world was also facing turmoil. The 18th century was marked by a series of violent goblin rebellions, which further strained the resources and stability of the fledgling ministry. It was a society defining itself, drawing new lines and building new structures for a new, hidden reality. It is in this context that the 1717 legislation must be viewed. It was more than just a criminal law. It was a profound act of nation-building. As the wizarding world built physical walls to hide itself from the Muggles, it also needed to build moral and ethical walls to define itself from within. By declaring these three curses unforgivable, the ministry was drawing a definitive line in the sand. They were establishing a fundamental taboo, a baseline of decency that separated a civilized wizard from a monster. The curses represented the ultimate violations of personhood, the theft of will, the infliction of agony, and the extinguishing of life. To outlaw them so absolutely was to declare that, no matter the pressures of their new hidden existence, wizarding society would not descend into a state where such atrocities were permissible. The prohibition of the Unforgivables became a foundational pillar of their new world order, a declaration of the values they sought to preserve in their self-imposed exile. With a new category of unforgivable crime came the need for an equally unforgivable punishment. The traditional wizarding prisons, small lockups scattered in various towns and villages, were deemed insecure and insufficient for this new era. The answer was found on a desolate, unplottable island in the middle of the North Sea, Azkaban. The fortress of Azkaban was not built as a prison. It was created in the 15th century by a mysterious and powerful dark sorcerer known only as Echrizdis. Believed to be insane, Echrizdis practiced the worst kinds of dark arts, luring Muggle sailors to his island to torture and kill them for his own pleasure. He shrouded the island in powerful concealment charms, and its existence remained unknown to the Ministry of Magic until after his death, when the charms faded. The Ministry officials who first investigated the fortress refused to speak of the horrors they found inside, but the most terrifying discovery was that the island was infested with dementors, foul, soul-sucking creatures that fed on human happiness and despair. For many years, the Ministry simply left the island abandoned, a breeding ground for these unkillable horrors. Many argued that the evil place should be destroyed, but others feared that depriving the Dementors of their home would unleash them upon the mainland in a wave of horrific revenge. The debate was settled in 1718, just 1 year after the Unforgivable Curses were classified. The new Minister for Magic, the authoritarian Damocles Rowell, scrapped plans for a new, purpose-built prison and insisted on using Azkaban. He saw the Dementors not as an abomination to be contained, but as a cost-effective advantage. They could be harnessed as guards, saving the Ministry time, trouble, and expense. Despite fierce opposition, Rowell's plan was implemented. Prisoners were sent to Azkaban, and none ever emerged. The constant presence of the Dementors, feeding on their every happy memory, drove the inmates to insanity and despair, leaving them as empty shells long before their bodies gave out. Thus, the Fortress of Despair became the ultimate deterrent. A life sentence in Azkaban was not merely a loss of freedom. It was the slow, agonizing destruction of the soul, a fate many considered worse than the swift, clean death of the killing curse. The establishment of Azkaban, with its Dementor guards, was the final, brutal punctuation mark on the Ministry's declaration. For those who dared to wield the Unforgivable Curses, there would be no mercy, no rehabilitation, only an eternity of cold and despair in the darkest prison on Earth. For over 2 centuries, the prohibition against the Unforgivable Curses stood as an absolute pillar of wizarding law. But the rise of the first true Dark Lord in generations, Lord Voldemort, would push the wizarding world to a breaking point, forcing it to confront a terrible question. In the fight against monsters, is it permissible to become monstrous yourself? The First Wizarding War, which raged from 1970 to 1981, was a conflict of unprecedented terror. Voldemort and his Death Eaters waged a campaign of brutal violence, using the Unforgivable Curses with impunity. They tortured and killed Muggles and wizards alike, using fear as their primary weapon. The Ministry of Magic's Aurors, trained to uphold the law, found themselves outmatched and overwhelmed. They were fighting an enemy that refused to play by the rules, an enemy that wielded the very magic the Aurors were forbidden to use. As the body count rose and the wizarding world teetered on the brink of collapse, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Bartemius Crouch Sr., made a fateful and controversial decision. He authorized the Aurors to use the Unforgivable Curses against suspected Death Eaters. It was a declaration of total war, an acknowledgement that the old rules no longer applied. This was a pragmatic, if brutal, strategy. It gave the Aurors the power to fight fire with fire, to meet the Death Eaters on their own terms. This decision, however, came at a profound moral cost. By sanctioning the use of spells defined by their pure, malicious intent, the Ministry was blurring the very line it had drawn in 1717. It was a necessary evil, a desperate measure for desperate times. But the act of wielding such dark magic, even in the name of a greater good, is a corrosive one. It risks tainting the souls of those who use it, of eroding the very principles they are fighting to defend. The Aurors who were forced to cast Crucio or Avada Kedavra in the line of duty may have helped win the war, but they carry the scars of those actions forever. This period represents a dark chapter in the Ministry's history, a time when, in its desperation to defeat the darkness, it allowed a measure of that same darkness into its own heart. It was a moral compromise that set a dangerous precedent, one that would come back to haunt the wizarding world in the years to come. If the first Wizarding War saw the Unforgivable Curses sanctioned as a tool of the state, the Second Wizarding War saw them normalized as a tool of oppression. When Lord Voldemort seized control of the Ministry of Magic in 1997, one of his first acts was to once again make the Unforgivable Curses legal. But this time, it was not a desperate measure for law enforcement. It was a blanket legalization for all, a move designed to unleash cruelty and rule through fear. Nowhere was this new reality more apparent than at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. With Dumbledore dead and the school under the control of Headmaster Severus Snape, Hogwarts was transformed from a place of learning into a microcosm of Voldemort's totalitarian regime. The Death Eater siblings, Alecto and Amicus Carrow, were appointed as teachers. Amicus taught what was formerly Defense Against the Dark Arts, now simply called the Dark Arts, where the curriculum was a practical study in cruelty. Alecto taught Muggle Studies, which became a course in pure-blood propaganda, teaching that Muggles were like animals, filthy and stupid. The Unforgivable Curses became a routine part of this new, brutal curriculum. As Neville Longbottom explained, students were required to practice the Cruciatus Curse on their classmates who had earned detention. It was a systematic effort to corrupt a new generation, to normalize sadism and break the spirits of those who might resist. To refuse was to be tortured yourself. It was an education in evil, designed to churn out a new wave of followers for the Dark Lord. Perhaps the most chilling single lesson in the history of the Unforgivables occurred years earlier, during Harry's 4th year. The disguised Barty Crouch Jr., in his role as Professor Moody, gave his class of 14-year-olds a practical demonstration of all 3 curses. He used a spider as his victim, first making it dance and perform acrobatics under the Imperious Curse, then torturing it with the Cruciata Curse, causing it to twitch and writhe in agony, and finally ending its life with a flash of green light from Avada Kedavra. It was a shocking and traumatic lesson, one that deeply disturbed the students, particularly Neville Longbottom, who was forced to watch the very curse that had destroyed his parents' minds. Crouch Jr. didn't stop there. He then proceeded to place each student, one by one, under the Imperious Curse, under the guise of teaching them to resist. It was a flagrant violation of magical law and a terrifying abuse of power, all carried out under the supposed authority of Albus Dumbledore. This lesson stands as a stark example of how easily the tools of evil can be introduced and normalized, disguised as education or preparation, under a corrupt or compromised authority. It was a dark foreshadowing of the horrors that would become commonplace at Hogwarts just a few years later. In a world defined by such stark moral lines, where the use of a single spell can condemn one's soul, what happens when the heroes, the champions of light, are pushed to use that very same darkness? The story of Harry Potter is not a simple tale of good versus evil. It is a nuanced exploration of the choices people make under extreme pressure. And in the crucible of the Second Wizarding War, several of our heroes were forced to walk a dark path, wielding the unforgivable curses themselves. Harry Potter's relationship with these curses is a map of his own moral and emotional journey. His first attempt came from a place of raw, unfiltered grief. In the Department of Mysteries, after witnessing Bellatrix Lestrange strike down Sirius Black, Harry, in a blind rage, shouted, "Crucio!" The curse knocked Bellatrix from her feet, but it did not inflict the agonizing torture for which it is known. Bellatrix, a master of the curse, merely laughed, taunting him that he had to truly mean it, to enjoy the pain. His righteous anger was not enough. He lacked the core of sadism necessary to fuel the spell. He tried again, twice, against Snape after Dumbledore's death, his hatred for the man who had betrayed his trust burning hot. But Snape, a far more experienced duelist, effortlessly blocked his attempts. It was not until the Battle of Hogwarts that Harry successfully cast the curse. In the Ravenclaw common room, he witnessed the loathsome Amicus Carrow spit in the face of Professor McGonagall. In that moment, something within Harry snapped. It was not the hot grief he felt for Sirius, but a cold, protective fury. He cast Crucio, and this time it worked. The curse was powerful enough to lift the Death Eater into the air and slam him unconscious against a bookcase. It was a disturbing moment, a sign that the war had pushed Harry to a darker place, forcing him to find within himself the capacity for true, malicious intent in the defense of someone he loved. Harry also used the Imperious Curse, but his use was not born of rage, but of cold, calculated necessity. To break into the Lestrange vault at Gringotts, he had no other choice but to control the Goblin Bogrod and the Death Eater Travers. It was a pragmatic decision in a desperate situation, a clear violation of a moral line, but one he felt was justified to achieve the greater goal of destroying Voldemort's Horcruxes. He never, however, cast the killing curse. To Harry, Avada Kedavra was the ultimate symbol of Voldemort's evil. It was the spell that had murdered his parents and defined his life. To use it would be to sink to his enemy's level, a line he was never willing to cross. Harry was not the only hero forced into this moral gray area. The formidable and ever-righteous Minerva McGonagall also cast an unforgivable curse. During that same confrontation in the Ravenclaw common room, to protect her students and buy Harry time, she placed Amicus Carrow under the Imperious Curse, forcing him to surrender his and his sister's wands. It was a shocking act from a character so defined by rules and propriety, a stark illustration of how the war forced even the most steadfast individuals to use dark tools for a noble purpose. These moments do not serve to glorify the use of the unforgivables. Rather, they complicate our understanding of them. They force us to question the absolute nature of the word unforgivable. In a world at war, where the choices are often between bad and worse, can the use of a dark spell to prevent a greater evil ever be justified? The stories do not offer an easy answer. Instead, they show us the heavy burden these choices place on the souls of those who make them, a permanent stain that even victory cannot entirely wash away. Our long journey into the shadows of the wizarding world is now drawing to a close. We have traced the history of the unforgivable curses from their genesis in the dark and fearful Middle Ages to their codification as the ultimate legal and moral taboo, and finally to their use as weapons of war by villains and heroes alike. We have seen that they are far more than just powerful spells. They are a reflection of the wizarding world's deepest anxieties about power, control, and the nature of the soul itself. The story of the Unforgivables is the story of intent. They are unique in the magical world because their very function is dependent on the caster's state of mind. They require a pure, unadulterated will to dominate, to torture, or to kill. This makes them a terrifying measure of the darkness that can reside within a person's heart. They are a legal benchmark, a clear line that, when crossed, offers no ambiguity and no defense. And they are a symbol of the ultimate violation of one being by another, a magical means of stripping away the very things that make us human, our will, our freedom from pain, and our very lives. Their history is a mirror, reflecting the evolution of wizarding society. Their prohibition in 1717 was an act of a community in crisis, defining its own morality as it retreated into secrecy. Their sanctioned use during the First Wizarding War shows a society willing to compromise its highest ideals in the face of annihilation. And their normalization as tools of punishment and control at Hogwarts under Voldemort's reign reveals the terrifying speed at which cruelty can become commonplace when fear and hatred take power. The unforgivable curses, in the end, are an enduring shadow, a permanent reminder of the capacity for evil that exists within the magical world, and the constant vigilance required to keep that shadow at bay. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of the wizarding world.